Welcome, everybody, to the Heaven and Earth podcast. I'm Merlin.
I'm Crystal.
So, we're recording this session with the moon in Leo shortly after the full moon in Cancer conjoined Mars. And we're recording in Leo because we're talking about some heavier topics. And in the context of all these heavier things we're going to be discussing, we really want to highlight and forefront hope. And knowing that whatever happens here on Earth, it doesn't ultimately affect our spirits. Our spirits are divine sparks from the heavens above, and we just go through particular experiences here, and we come out on the other side unscathed. And additionally, for legacy, knowing that will be difficult, how do we want to be remembered? What kind of work do we want to do? And this is another question that is always in the forefront of the Leonine mind.
Who you are is really how you react to situations, how you respond. You aren't your context, right? And the Leo moon knows that because Leo knows that, the sun knows that. And like who you are is what you carry into a situation and what you make of a situation and the decisions that you make in those situations. And that's ultimately what hones your spirit. That's what grows your spirit and what helps you to, would you say, fully incarnate?
Yeah.
Right. So the Leo moon, right? Like the moon as ruled by the sun and the spirit, right? And helps us to enter into that portal. And
Yep.
there is a herb that we're bringing in today. It's a really sacred herb. It's known as Brahmi, not to be confused with Bacopa, which is also maybe more commonly called Brahmi, but it's a sacred herb to this region of the world that we're in, Bali, and in Ayurveda. It is considered to be very sacred, very holy, and it's known as an herb of mental clarity as well as longevity, right? So this is an adaptogen that helps you to react in times of stress with more insight, with more peace, more relaxation and spaciousness, helping you to see where you can move, what you can do, what opportunities you can take in a good way. This is a herb that's associated with meditation as well as with purification. So for those who during these fires in Los Angeles might be breathing in a lot of smoke, this is going to help you to purge the toxins or cleanse yourself of the toxins that you take in, while also protecting yourself. It's a liver protective. It also helps to increase the circulation, moving out what you don't want, and maintaining that peaceful alert strength while also building vitality.
And I'll also just add a little Sanskrit etymology to that. Know that Brahmi is the same kind of formation as yogi to yoga. A yogi is one who has or holds yoga. Brahmi is the plant that holds or has Brahma, which is the divine. So a plant that helps you connect with, again, that divine spark within yourself that is always equanimous and non-reactive to what is happening outside of you.
Yeah, it's
Yeah.
beautiful.
Yeah. Okay. So we're going to start with an astrological frame for what's been going on currently. I think we could all tell that since the last 9 months or so, things have been particularly intense on a geopolitical level, on a global level. And this coincides with the Jupiter-Saturn square that began in the late May, early June. And this is a particularly troublesome moment in the Jupiter-Saturn synodic cycle. So a synodic cycle is just how two planets are relating to each other. And people will often talk about the Jupiter-Saturn conjunction, which is a very big, important moment in their cycle for mundane purposes, and that coincided with COVID. There's a lot that was going on there that we could unpack, but you can look at any aspect that they're making to get a sense for what kinds of events are going to be going on at a geopolitical level. And at this moment, they're forming a square. And it's a fairly troublesome square. This, for those of you who are really astrologically nerdy like me, that Saturn is in the superior position here, so it's particularly hard. And we've seen that going on. There's been threats at different points of World War III. The wars around the world are getting worse and worse. And there's additionally, it's the climate disasters that have been getting very, very severe too. And the climate disasters that especially obviously what's going on now in LA, but also what happened in the East Coast in Asheville. There's just so devastating, so many lives
That
lost.
area of Appalachia.
Yeah, and I think just to compare, the last time that we had this Jupiter-Saturn square with Jupiter in the inferior position, Saturn in the superior position, which is exactly what's going on right now, that was in late 2000, began in late 2004 into like the late 2005, and that coincided with the Great Tsunami that happened and devastated all of Indonesia and the South Pacific. And it's particularly noteworthy for those who are very astrologically nerdy that that happened within the same elements. That was Saturn in a water sign and Jupiter in an air sign. And this is the same thing. Saturn
Wow.
is in a water sign in Pisces and Jupiter is in an air sign in Gemini. So it's the same configuration. And we can take a look at, we basically in astrology, we just extrapolate from the past and see past alignments that were similar to then interpret what's going to be going on in the future, predict the future based off of what's happened in the past. And the same the same shifts that happened then are going to happen now. Saturn is going to move from a water sign into a fire sign around the same time that Jupiter moves from an air sign into a water sign. And back then, as they were starting to apply towards their second square that was happening, that happened just after Hurricane Katrina in August of 2005. And here we're building up to their second square again. And this is gonna that square, in 2005, late 2005, happened with Saturn in Leo and Jupiter in Scorpio. This is happening with Saturn in Aries, another fire sign, and Jupiter in Cancer. So pros and cons. The one big pro is that Jupiter's a lot stronger in Cancer than he was in Scorpio. But the other difficulty is that the square is happening almost simultaneously with them moving in to those new signs. And so it's hard for me to say whether it's going to be better or worse than what happened last time, but I will just say that definitely be on the lookout for the next square that happens in, which will be in June of 2025. So in 5 months or so. That I'm really highlighting June as a particularly intense month. I think as that square perfects, there's going to be a lot going down. There may be a lot going down building up to it or shortly after it. But then the upshot is that afterwards it will start to wind down. No, and later on, I'm going to talk about like a bigger picture prognosis, but that's just the general frame that's going on right now. So you know that, yeah, astrologically speaking, this is a very challenging period. But of course, there are things that we can do to mitigate that in our own lives and sail through with as much grace as possible. So Crystal's got some practices, some remediations for all of you too,
Well,
or just or whatever you had.
yeah. And so uh you were also going to discuss that this triplicity shift,
Yeah,
right? That we went through was really
yeah, I'll get to that later. I want to get into some practical stuff now.
okay. Well, to start with, I want to say, we're doing this, of course, because there have been so many tragedies, globally. And for a lot of parts in the world there, things have been cataclysmic for a really long time, right? Like in some areas of the world, like, Palestine and many regions in Africa, they've been hit, right? For decades, right? And this hit is, coming to our part of the world, like it's our turn to start feeling the effects of the extractive nature of capitalism and imperialism. And we've, had tastes of that, right, with Katrina, and I think Matthew's going to talk about some similarities with some astrological similarities with Katrina. And now we've had this one really big water hit, right, to the East Coast that nobody was expecting, and now this really kind of, shocking hit to the, major metropolis that, nobody was expecting of the West Coast, Los Angeles. And this is really scary. And it's creating a lot of, it's creating ripe conditions for some conspiracy theories, which can be distracting to us actually being able to make moves to address the situation and arise to the challenge in that, that leonine way of, building our own legacies and creating a better and more beautiful future. Right. And as I address this point, I want to, not saying this to brag, but just letting you know like where I'm coming from. I've been researching conspiracy theories since I was 16 years old. So that's 24 years. I've read the complete works of Robert Anton Wilson, like over 10 years ago. I, have read, spent many hours reading declassified documents, out of the CIA, as well as, keeping up on what's happening in Russia and China. So I'm very hip to conspiracy theories, and I very much know how they can be manipulated in order to distract and take us off course. Right? There are many like false rabbit holes that you can fall down that have been laid for us very intentionally to keep common people from coming together, right? And this is like just one branch of that divide and conquer campaign that, is that, left and right wing of the same bird, right? So just be cautious, keep your feet on the ground, right? And just look at, if you need to know who caused something, right? You might not need to think of even in terms of cause, right? Because cause and effect aren't real, but you just look at who's profiting off of a situation.
Yeah, just follow the money.
Yeah, always, always, always follow the money and know that your job in any situation is to help your fellow man, help your fellow creature. Don't let this situation, don't let stories, false stories, or even if they're real stories, don't let them divide you from your neighbor.
Regardless of who they voted for.
Exactly. Or, regardless of whether they, believe, HARP caused the floods, or if, these fires were, already known about or intentionally started in Los Angeles. Those aren't helpful conversations, but what is a helpful conversation is knowing that the CEO of Nestle, right? Or like whoever was involved in, letting Nestle completely drain Southern California's water aquifers. Well, they should probably not be in power, right? They should probably definitely be held accountable. Right. And you should still, regardless, be helping and de-stressing your neighbor who was affected. Right. Regardless of what political beliefs or what stories they're telling, like let your heart lead in these situations. Right. And know like this, we need to come together during these times, because the fact are, we're talking, this is about, talking about prophecies here, right? And we're using the stars to, help guide our steps forward. Well, there are a lot of prophecies in different cultures about these times, right? And the most important commonality between all of these prophecies is that it's only those who are living in community will survive, right? And that's physical. That's like your fellow human, right? That's your local plant allies, right? And that's also community with the land and community with all of the guides and ancestors who walk with you, right? We need to learn how to listen to our community of stars, right? The community within our bodies of the microbes and the cells and, all of the beautiful different, permutations of starlight that we are. It's really important that we ground ourselves in these tools that we have to listen to anything other than the thought loops and fear spirals and anxious fluctuations of the mind, right? We need to get out of here, right? Get out of pure symbol, get out of this echo chamber, and listen to all of the other truer, more grounded ways of guiding our path forward.
Yeah. So practically think of how you can help other people around you see the divine in every single person that you meet. Know that if they don't agree with you politically, they've probably been conditioned to, in the same way that we've all to a certain extent been conditioned. And know that we're stronger together, and that's how to survive moving forward, according to many different traditions and many prophecies, as Crystal said. So this is a really big deal from an astrological angle. We just we all remember that we went through, everybody was talking about how we went through a major triplicity shift uh 4 or 5 years ago with the Jupiter-Saturn conjunction. And then just with the way that modern astrology goes, everybody's immediately chasing the new shiny fancy thing, talking about something else. But like really, we still have a lot of unpacking to do with this Jupiter Saturn triplicity shift that occurred. When people talk about how there's a great portal cosmic alignment that is occurring every other Wednesday, this actually was a huge, major, once in a lifetime shift that even many people don't see in their lifetimes. This is something that only happens every 240 years. These are actual seismic transformations that occur, the triplicity shifts. And for those of you who don't know what triplicity is, that's when Jupiter and Saturn start conjoining in a new element. So prior to this, they had been conjoining in Earth signs for 250 years, 40 years, and that coincides with the Industrial Revolution, more or less, and the calcination or the calcification of empire. And now they are moving into air signs. And it just so happens that we went through this exact same shift in the very early 13th century. The last triplicity shift from an earth element to an air element was in 1206. And what's particularly noteworthy about that is that it was the same signs in order in which Jupiter and Saturn were conjoining. So they first conjoined in Taurus, and that was the last Earth conjunction. And then they conjoined in Aquarius. And it was an Aquarius conjunction that got everything set off and ready to go. And of course, of note is that it was another Aquarius Jupiter Saturn conjunction that happened 150 years after the triplicity shift that coincided with the Black Plague within about 6 months. And that Jupiter Saturn conjunction also had Mars very, very close in the sky at that moment, which was exactly what happened with the beginning of COVID in early 2020. It was Jupiter, Saturn, and Mars all together. And people back then in 1345 were saying that this happened because of the Jupiter Saturn conjunction with Mars there, back when everybody did astrology. Everybody was blaming it on the astrology back then. And we can now, as astrologers, point and look at the exact same thing and say, wow, the same configuration occurred, and we dealt with another plague, essentially. So as an astrologer, as a predictive astrologer, as an extrapolator, essentially, I look back and I see, okay, we went through the exact same cycle of Jupiter Saturn conjunctions back then as we did now. And so what are we going into? What did we go into then? What does that tell us about what we're going into now? Now, basically, that was the decline of the Middle Ages. There was a lot of chaos and crisis going on around the world at that time, with the most intense things, of course, being the plague and the Mongol expansion, which led to the utter decimation of the Arabic world at the time, and also the Crusades too. And these are all very, very problematic, very, very challenging. Honestly, a scale of death that we haven't even, none of us have ever really seen in our lifetimes. That wasn't really seen since World War II, or the
One
Vietnam
in
War.
every three, right?
Yeah, 1 in every 3 people in Europe died, and some people say it might have even been more.
Yeah.
And we're talking about, the Mongol expansion across all of Asia, from Beijing to Alexandria in Egypt. They just leveled cities. Imagine.
I'm bad at numbers, but it was really, really big.
Is really big. It's huge. And just imagine like the capital of an empire doesn't surrender, and so they just burn the whole thing to the ground. Imagine Baghdad just being burnt to the ground and everybody dies. That's what happened. I haven't seen that kind of thing. Hopefully, we won't see that kind of thing.
Yeah, we're not saying that
I'm not
that's
saying-
definitely
no,
what's going to.
but we're saying, it's gonna get intense. It's gonna get intense, not just in the immediate future, but in the next, really the next couple of centuries. I don't even know if we'll necessarily see the most intense parts of it, but yeah, I think it's going to get intense, basically. And it's of course noted that, at the time there was this two-pronged attack on the Islamic world, and we are, right now there's kind of a major
Yeah.
attack going in on the Islamic world.
The Crusades. that were happening then are happening in the same exact place right now.
Yes, the exact same place,
Yeah.
exact
Like, yes.
within miles of each other. The
That
invade
same acupuncture point on the
on
earth
the
is
earth,
getting
yeah,
activated.
the same, like yeah, the invasions of Damascus and Acre and Jerusalem, it's the same spot. So the now what's the upshot? So the advantage was that all of this crazy leveling that occurred, it led to some positive things. For one, the Mongol expansion and the Crusades both led to a lot more globalization and free trade. There was a lot more conversations that were happening with different nations. And in the long run, there was this huge cosmopolitan sharing of ideas that came out in the final third of that air triplicity, essentially. And of course, this was also, typified in Europe by the Renaissance. The later portion of this triplicity coincides with the Renaissance, where the interactions and the conversations that happened between Muslim sages and scholars and European scholars led to the rediscovery of all of the classical texts that we use at that time.
The
And
rebirth of
it was the
Hermeticism.
rebirth of Hermeticism. There suddenly had all these new, like people don't realize the only text of Plato that people had throughout the Middle Ages was the Timaeus, an extremely important text. But that was all they had. They didn't have the Republic. They didn't have any of these seminal works, but they did have it in the Arabic world. And there was this basically cross-pollination that happened that was extraordinarily fruitful. And it also, the decimation, like the combined crusades and the trade that came out of that, coupled with the decimation of all classes of people in Europe, led to the emergence of the middle class. So instead of
The
royals
merchant
and
class.
serfs, now you had a merchant class, you had people in the middle, and you had people who were not totally subjugated by the elites, by the aristocracy. And we have certainly seen a calcification and ossification of established power structures within the last couple hundred years. And I do think that in the long run, that will come crashing down. I don't see the same families, the same holders of
Mhm.
power having power within a couple centuries from now. I don't see that happening because there will be forces that come in and basically put everybody on an equal playing field.
Because remember, the Renaissance was largely built in this revolution of even like the growth and the nurturance of Hermeticism didn't happen by upper class people, didn't happen by people who had power before. It happened from people who accrued wealth and power through trade.
Mhm.
Example, the Medici.
Yep.
And those of you who, maybe watch the Serpent Queen or have some familiarity with the Medici's rise to power. I mean, the Renaissance, you could say, in Europe was due to Medici power and influence,
Mhm.
right? Like it's these new players, right? And like Shakespeare, right? Like he was from the middle class, right? He was an educated man, not from the upper class. So we have, the beauty of the English language itself that we have today is due in large part to Shakespeare, right? And the shifts in power that happened due to, unfortunately, these great tragedies that happened at the Triplicity shift.
Yeah. So that's the thing. To get the great equalization that everybody wants, there's going to be a lot of pain that we go through to get there. The disadvantage is that it means that we will have to go through a lot of pain collectively, but the advantage is that we will get there inevitably. And, everybody wants to ascend to 5D consciousness, and that's all I hear people talking about. I mean,
It's not all you hear people
it's
talking
all.
about.
I wake up in the morning at 5 a.m. and that I just
Voices
hear
in
the
his head
voices coming
are
to me,
whispering.
and they're like 5D. Yeah, I'm a 5D star seed. Yeah,
And it
no,
says that there's etheric sprites in Ubud that just
right,
follow
exactly. And people wonder
follow
why I'm so
Matthew
angry all
around,
the time.
annoying
Yeah.
him. And there's nothing wrong.
It's,
No, we're not saying that 5D consciousness isn't like a thing, right? Like we have, we're both people who have visions
yeah,
pretty regularly.
I live there all the time.
It's
I've ascended already. Yeah.
And we clearly, we work with the stars. We believe our spirits come from the stars. But there's this interesting, and I think we wanted to talk about this later. There's this interesting thing that has been seeded into this talk about star seeds and 5D consciousness that has created this new kind of very weird elitism that, like
Yeah,
the
right.
part of me, which is only a part of me, right? But the part of me that's still that, loves to go down those wormholes. I'm like,
Is this a
is this
psyop?
the high
Is this
Is
psyop?
this CIA
The
interference?
thing,
Like this
I
is
am
getting like so like you've made a joke from love and light to love and
no,
white.
no, no, no,
Go ahead
no,
and
no, 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 no.
like it
Yeah,
does
it
get
does
like
get there.
weirdly
Yeah,
white power, and I'm like, they're
that's
trying to
kind of yeah,
manipulate these technologies just like they did during Nazism, right? To create this new class of elitism. The fact is, listen, the fact is, and everybody needs to know this, right? Like nobody's better than anybody else here.
yeah,
Nobody.
yeah,
Nobody's further along than anybody else here. You're on this planet, you're in the same place.
yeah.
Get rid of the bullshit elitism, right? You might be like working on a different issue, might be working on a different plane, but those levels are all pretty fucking one to one.
Yeah, just because you can experience the oneness of the universe and see spirits sometimes, and you've got a lot of tattoos, doesn't mean you're better than anybody else. I mean, and that's I see that a lot. It's like I meditate, so I'm an Ubermensch, or an Uberfrau or something like that. And we just you just avoid that. These spiritual practices are about helping you to see what you have in commonality with everybody else, not make you feel
Compassion.
and compassion, not to make you feel superior to other people because you have a spiritual practice. Like,
Right.
so, but I just brought that up as a joke. I said, yeah, if you want to ascend, if you want to get to 5D consciousness or whatever, you're gonna have to leave some things behind.
Mhm.
You're gonna need to go through a real threshing. And speaking of threshing, this is, this triplicity shift began in Aquarius, which is the sign of Saturn, and who's the great thresher, the great watcher on the threshold, the one who refines and purifies the ego so that the true light, clear light of the void can come in and shine through us. And so we're all going to go through a major threshing collectively for the next couple centuries. I would say hesitantly, maybe things will turn around like 2080, 2180. 2180, I would say.
Mhm.
If you want to see that, then you got to start working on your internal alchemical practices to become immortal.
To drink a lot of Gotu
You're gonna have to
Kola.
drink a lot of Gotu Kola. You're going to learn how to go into the woods for long periods of time and just circulate the energy within you. Um,
Doesn't mean that we can't all have bliss and be happy, right? Like we can learn to live in community through this because as like we're talking about one area of the world, like talking about like white supremacy, right? Like we're talking about one like the history of one area of the world. There's a lot of other histories going on all over the world that we don't have recorded,
yeah.
right? There were still people living in community, living, like at one with the earth who might be having their own like individual issues, but that weren't affected on those particular, like acupressure points on the earth. But the fact is we are still living in that same empire. We're still living in that same culture, right? Our culture is effectively the one that has globalized the whole earth, is effectively still ancient Sumer, right? Because we were still a product of the expansion of their crops and their livestock, right?
Mhm.
Like wheat, cows, pigs, chicken, those are all from Sumer. That's what has spread. It's like that's still what makes up the way we think, the way that we're patterned.
Mhm.
So we're still living that story. Like those are still the stars that we're spinning in.
Yeah. So, if we really want to end that narrative, if we want to really return to the earth in an integrated way, we've got 5,000 years of history that we need to work through,
Unravel.
and unravel. Now, in the process of that, there is always room for flourishing. There's still always room for bliss. I think I totally believe that I believe the prophecies and the people who live in community with with their fellow, brothers and sisters, and who
Their
also
guides.
and also with their invisible community. Those are the ones who will, be saved or have the easiest time of things, or will kind of be able to sort of skirt through without too much of an issue. Um, so that's the goal. And I do believe that that's completely possible. But now more than ever, I think as we're preparing for this, it's good to start building community, or start building invisible community. Start giving offerings to your guides, connecting with your ancestors, praying with the spirits of the heavens, and starting to connect with something greater than yourself.
Know that like this, your heart is what's going to guide you forward, not your head telling you stories about,
Yeah.
you know, where you need to track down the evils. No, I have both of my malefics in Scorpio. You know, like I'm saying that because I need to hear that. Right? Like I have Saturn and Mars in Scorpio. So it's very easy for me to you know get paranoid and want to point the finger and want to find the source and you know find who's the darkest dark that's doing all of this. But you know the thing is that's really not helpful, even though we do need to protect ourselves and we do need to know that like you know the people who are in power right now need to not be in power.
Mhm.
You know they need to not be in power, and if we have any way to get them out of power, that would be you know fantastic. But a lot of us don't have a way to do that, so the only thing we can do is you know listen to your heart and take the opportunities that you have to make a better and more fair and just and beautiful world.
Yeah, we pray, we connect with our supporters, and we do what we can. Okay, so I think we're gonna wrap it up there.
We'll do a part two because we didn't get to talk about many remedies.
Yeah, we'll do a part two of some more remediatory practical stuff. But yeah, love to see your comments, love to see what you guys have to say about this.
Like,
And yeah,
share,
like,
follow.
share, follow, and yeah, take care, everybody. Many blessings to you on this wonderfully transformative journey that we are all on together.